Former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris went head-to-head this week in their first and possibly only debate. The difference between the two candidates' speech style, rhetoric, and word choice were apparent.
Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less.
I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
To help break down the differences in their speech styles, we spoke with two linguists, Jennifer Mercieca, Director of Communications and Journalism at Texas A&M University, and Nicole Holliday, Linguist Professor at University of California, Berkeley. Jennifer and Nicole, thank you both so much for joining me. Nicole, I'd like to start with you. What stood out to you when you were listening to the debate about how Harris was speaking?
I've been studying her since 2019, and every speech that she's given or every appearance that she's had in this cycle, she seems to be more and more like a traditional politician. So she's very rehearsed. She's very under control. She's really moving her style towards something that is more legibly presidential for a general audience. There was one moment where she was exasperated with him, and this was when he was making the really offensive racist remarks about immigrants eating pets, which was, hyperbolic and also genuinely ridiculous, which she called out. And she said, well, that's extreme.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
You talk about extreme.
Jennifer, I'd like to ask you the same question. Was there anything that stood out to you about how Trump was speaking in this debate?
He tried a lot of his normal strategies. He tried name calling. He tried using the Gish Gallop strategy of just a barrage of lies and misinformation. He tried a lot of his old tricks, and what was most surprising to me was that they were very ineffective against Kamala Harris.
How much work is done to get a presidential candidate to their speaking style, and how does that look like for Trump?
Presidential candidates, mostly spend years and years learning how to speak. For Donald Trump, his speaking style was really honed through the experience that he had working in reality television. He learned from working on The Apprentice how to build a moment and build suspense, and he learned comedic timing. Through his rallies, he has certainly learned how to interact with the crowd. He spends a lot of time cultivating his style.
Nicole, what is it about Harris's personal and professional background that's led to her speaking style today?
Yeah, so everybody sort of constructs their identity through speech. Regular people do this too. This is why we can recognize someone that's from the same place as us. For example, they're going to have a distinctive regional accent. We see ethno-linguistic variation. So Black speakers do different things than white speakers on average, right? When you look at her vowels, for example, she sounds like a Californian of her age, but not too much. In a more casual style, when she is doing a rally or making a campaign stop, you'll see her be a little bit more like she uses slang, like occasionally profanity. Trump does it too. So she's got a sort of more I'm one of you kind of style than maybe a very traditional politician. She's Californian. She sounds Black. She sounds like a woman. And all of this is congruent with her identity, but also part of the brand that she is constructing for voters.
What is it about Trump's background that informs how he speaks today, especially being a New Yorker?
There is some of it that you can attribute to him being a New Yorker. For example, he was flustered and kept saying terra, 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 which was not normal for him, but I think is sort of an indication of how stressed he was in that moment. He sort of reverted back to his original New York accent.
Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror.
His speaking style is more informed by his strategic goals. He doesn't want to account for his decisions, for his policies. He wants to dominate. So his speaking style reflects that.
Jennifer, I'm really glad that you mentioned that about his New York accent coming out. The linguists I follow online were all like, what's happening with his R's? So this is a very notable sort of stigmatized feature of New York City English to when you have a final R for it to sort of become part of the vowel. So instead of terror, he was saying terra. And the interpretation from a sociolinguist is, this person has lost control, because when we are using our formal style, we're usually very carefully monitoring the style. And so anything that is regional and potentially stigmatized is usually something you're not going to use. And so it could be evidence that he was just sort of flustered and he forgot that he was supposed to not have a New York City accent. But that was really notable as well.
What is a style shift in the way a person speaks, especially in the context of a political candidate?
The idea that you can have a more narrow range of style is usually a reflection of some linguistic and social privilege. When I've been talking with Black speakers and interacting with folks online, everyone's saying, well, duh, like every professional Black person in America knows how to use different styles when they are talking to white audiences versus Black audiences. We have lots of literature on this. So part of what's happened is the Trump campaign has seized on this stylistic difference that they see Harris do and tried to say that it's evidence of her inauthenticity. But it's not, right? It's just that she's a person that has had to learn to have different styles because of her background, because of her biography. And indeed, it's linguistically effective and pro-social to sound more like the audience that you're talking to in any given setting.
Why does it matter that we even talk about how a person speaks, especially when it's a presidential candidate?
So there are ways to communicate that are democratic. Inviting people to be persuaded, asking them to think like you do, to believe or value the things that you believe and value, to feel like you feel. That's an invitation. There are other ways to communicate which are completely authoritarian. And those are things like coercion and manipulation and propaganda. And so it's incredibly important as we examine, a potential leader of this nation to think about how they communicate and what that tells us about their commitment to democracy or to other forms of government.
Nicole, I'd like to ask you the same thing. Why does it matter that we talk about how Harris speaks?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Jennifer said. From my perspective, right, I tend to study these kind of micro level things, so like the vowels, the tone, and stuff like that. Everything about who we are comes out when we do that level of analysis. And so this has worked for and against candidates in the past. It could be a very large liability for voters to hear her as sounding Black. So she has to really walk this line of, I need to be legible to you, even though my identity as a multiracial person, as a child of immigrants, as a Californian might not be so familiar. We're not used to listening to someone in power like her, or many Americans are not used to listening to someone like her. So she has to invent the way that a person with her biography sounds presidential.
Jennifer Mercieca with Texas A&M University and Nicole Holliday with UC Berkeley, thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.